Thank you very much, Florencio. ¿Cuántos españoles están aquí? Unos. La mayoría. Okay. Nevertheless, I will present the slides in English. Sorry for that. Okay. As already introduced by Florencio, we are talking about 3 case studies. The one in Vienna is related to the EU-GUGLE project, so meaning the, let's say, the frame of this conference. Another one is related to Innsbruck. That is part of the Sinfonia project, also a smart city project. And the third case study is in Graz, in the south of Austria. And there we are talking about a research project dealing with prefabricated facades. Yeah, here you have, as a kind of introduction, some pictures. On the left hand, you can see the refurbished building with the facade. Stefan will present it in detail, what is inside and what is the main miracle behind it. The picture above is one refurbished school in Innsbruck. It is also part of Innsbruck, but we will focus in our presentation on residential buildings rather than public buildings. And the third picture is one interesting case of Vienna. And also here, Stefan will tell you a little bit about the background story, because it is really a particular case and related challenges. In general, we have faced some preconditions and some challenges within Graz, Innsbruck, and Vienna. Graz, in particular, with the already mentioned prefabricated facade. In Innsbruck and Vienna, the particular renewal of the residential buildings, and in Innsbruck also in the integration of roof-mounted photovoltaic system. So the idea of prefabricated facade, of course, is to reduce the dust and the noise and all, let's say, all heavy circumstances with refurbishment down to maybe 1 week or something like that. You have seen already a presentation from Magdalena about MEVs that had the same idea in mind in order to reduce significantly the time you need to at the construction site. The other challenge is, of course, and we had a workshop already in 2015 together with our partners from MEVs about what is by the end prefabricated facades. Are they only a niche market, or are they really be matured or even prematured for the market on short term? So up to now, we have to say there are a couple of examples all over Europe, but mainly in Central Europe. You can find it. With the residential buildings of Innsbruck and Vienna, we have faced several issues, technical issues that could be solved in most cases, but also, let's say, social issues. Because like in Aachen, in Vienna and Innsbruck, you have to ask the tenants whether they allow the access to the apartment. You have, as a house owner, only maybe once a year the possibility to do so. So it has to be planned beforehand. That is one thing. The other thing is that without their allowance, you cannot implement ventilation system, regardless it is centralized or decentralized. And in both cases, in Innsbruck and Vienna, for instance, we have done it in that way, or will do it in that way, that the holes for the decentralized ventilation system will be prepared, but only in those households that have give us the allowance. There will be these systems implemented. Okay, now it's up to Stefan.
Thank you, Michael. Well, Graz. Graz is not only one building. You can see it on the left side below. That was the building before the renovation. It was done a few years ago. The team implemented a prefabricated facade. You see it on the upper right floor. It's a wooden structure with a honeycomb structure on the back. On the front is a glass facade. It's ventilated, so there is no moisture. The positive effect of this facade is that during the winter, the sunbeams can penetrate the structure really deep and can heat up the whole building, also the whole wall. Therefore, you need less heat to have lower heating demand. During summer, the honeycomb structure shades itself, so the steeper sunbeams don't penetrate so deep, and therefore it's shaded for itself. The reduction of the thermal heating was reduced by this facade by about 90%, and also the CO2 emissions of the building were reduced because of that. They not only implemented this facade, they also installed a groundwater heat pump, and the groundwater heat pump can produce the whole energy demand of the building. Also, there is a ventilation system implemented, a decentralized ventilation system with heat recovery, and I think 75% of the heat can be recovered from the exhaust air. You can see here some facts about the buildings. The energy demand was decreased tremendously. You can see before, it's some parts of the building, it was as high as 225 kilowatt hours per square meter in the year, and it was reduced to 11 kilowatt hours per square meters in the year. The calculated energy demand with PHPP was basically the same, so there is no difference between the calculation and the real energy demand. Here on the right side, you can see the principle of the facade, or of the honeycomb structure, how it functions during winter and in the summer. You also see that the investment was per square meter quite low in comparison. And what's interesting is that the installation cost on site was just 51 euros per square meter. That's of course because the facade was prefabricated in the shop, and the on-site time was reduced. Therefore, also the tenants, it wasn't that uncomfortable for the tenants because of the short amount of time. The project won a lot of awards because it was quite innovative to implement all those things with a facade. In the meantime, we are implementing a more complex version of that facade in Vienna, in one of our EU-GUGLE project buildings. The difference is that in the facade, in the outer glass shell, transparent photovoltaic cells are implemented, and the transparent photovoltaic cells are producing the heat and producing the energy which is used for the ventilation system. So now Innsbruck.
Thank you, Stefan. So here are some facts and highlights of Innsbruck. As I said, it is part of the Sinfonia project, Smart City project, also of the 7th framework program. The project duration will be 1 year longer rather than EU-GUGLE, so we are not at the end, but there will be, I guess, a final conference as well. It is a typical building of so-called Neue Heimat, Tirol. It is a housing company, a bigger one in the region Tirol. You can find some calculated values about the performance, so what is was before the renovation and what is targeted over here. What we don't have is, for the moment, monitoring results, but we are expecting it after the heating season of this winter period. Yeah, I mean, the way how to deal with it is quite classical. You have the envelope, then insulated with EPS. The same is for the roof, and there have to be new decentralized gas boilers installed. It is a funny thing, or a strange thing, let's say, in Austria, that in this kind of buildings, you have a lot of different heating systems, decentralized heating systems, that were, let's say, co-funded or promoted at that time. So therefore, you have a mix, and because if it is not possible to connect it to the district heating, or heat pump solutions can be found. It will be it is recommended to use decentralized gas boilers. Then we have controlled central ventilation system, and as I said, due to the fact that you have to request the tenants, only part of these are connected, but all are prepared that in case of the tenants leave the apartment, then it will be connected to the ventilation system. Yeah, here you have some figures. So most important is that the increase of the rent is more or less compensated by the less of operational costs what you have on the monthly basis. So therefore, for the tenants, the increase of the rent, monthly rent, is reasonable.
Okay, so before I come to the building of Vienna, I'd like to talk a little bit of the smart city concept or smart city goals of Vienna. Why do we need smart city goals in Vienna, and why do we need climate goals? At the moment, about 1.8 million of inhabitants are living in Vienna. it's growing, as Vienna is growing per 1% per year, and it covers 415 square meters. It's, funny fact, it's not the biggest city or biggest town when you look at the area. There are some mountain regions which are bigger, a little bit bigger than Vienna. But why are the cities are key? About 2% of the world's surface are covered by cities, and in this area, about 43% of the world's population is living currently. These cities, or our cities, are responsible for about 75% of the CO2 emissions. And our cities are currently growing, as we heard before in the morning. So in the future, it's key to decarbonize our city to reach our climate goals. I think otherwise, maybe it won't be possible. So what's the strategy towards 2050 for Vienna? We're trying to keep the living standard in Vienna as high as possible. We have been awarded with a few awards in the last, I guess, 10 years, that we are the city with the highest living standard. And we are trying to keep it that way. Therefore, we have to preserve our resources, and yeah, this can be achieved through comprehensive innovations. Some facts for 2050. We are trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 80%. That means that per inhabitant, less than 1 ton of CO2 can be emitted during the year, and that our primary energy consumption has to be reduced under 2000 watts. We also are trying to increase the share of renewables from 11 to 50%, and therefore we need the surrounding area for Vienna. We need the wind energy, the solar energy from the rural area to be stored and used inside the city. Therefore we are focusing on making our buildings a storage system. That can be done with various techniques. And also we are trying to use the waste heat inside the city to power our plants, our flats, or to store the energy in the ground for the winter. So this is the project from Vienna. It's one of our EU-GUGLE buildings. Well, there was a quite massive gas explosion in 2014. Part of the roof and the building collapsed, and therefore, a complete renovation was necessary. Now there are 29 dwellings inside the building. 9 of them are in the attic, and the rest of the building was renovated. The lower part of the building, the existing part, was awarded with the EnerFit certificate, and the attic was awarded with, reached the passive house standard. Because this building is a listed building, on the outside walls it was just possible to use aerogel insulation, and just about 5 centimeters because it has to keep it looks. On the inside of the building, some hemp fiber insulation was used in the courtyard, and altogether a very good energy saving could be reached. In the basement, well, not in the basement, in the ground floor, there was a garage installed, and therefore the courtyard is now higher up and gets more direct sunlight. So the living quality for the inhabitants, it has increased. Also, you can see on the left picture on the top there are some solar thermal collectors, and in the middle picture you can see the floor-activated heating system. It's very important to use heating systems with low temperatures because it's easier to produce them with renewable energy. There's also a central ventilation system installed with heat recovery, and all the windows have sun shading. The sun shading you can see on the right picture here. The costs of this bill for this renovation are not very typical because, as you have seen on the first picture, there was quite a severe damage of the building, and we were happy that 36% of the costs were covered by a national project the national fund, and 1% was covered by the EU. The rest was covered by the house owners. So, our conclusions from Vienna.
Thank you. One point is what we are facing. Of course, every time there is always a difference between willingness to pay and then later on to invest in real. That is something that we will not, let's say, cannot overcome. So the voluntary willingness is mostly much higher than the reality is reflecting it. Yes, the degree of satisfaction, I mean, people feel during the construction phase different things, and that is one thing, but after 1 year they may forget about it. What they don't forget is if you reduce the daylight due to installing lift or other things, elevators or other things, so that is one thing. On the other hand, often we have heard that they say, okay, this winter we haven't needed our heating system. And so therefore there is always a mix of it, and it is, let's say, oscillating quite a lot. And this oscillation is also, if you ask them whether they are proud about being a part of a smart city project or living in a smart environment, the reaction is quite diverse. Whatever happens, the communication is one of the most important issues that you have to address. That is time-consuming, but if there is a resistance, that it's even more time-consuming. So it is, let's say, a result of all the demonstration sites what we have, that a certain communication, let's say, strategy and timely, in accordance with the construction firms, should be met, and is highly recommended. Yeah, and that's it. So thank you very much. And here you have the email address of Stefan, nowadays in the municipal department of Vienna, located. And my email address remains for the time being. Thank you.